Good morning, Vietnam!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family.
Here's Johnny!
Whoa, this is heavy. I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Working on my day off.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Showtime with Roman podcast, the not-so-feature-length podcast where I, your host, Roman RBC, talks about film, movies, because that's what I love. And I literally just got done watching a movie, actually. Bing Liu's Minding the Gap, set in my hometown of Rockford, Illinois. Just one of the year's best films. He's about my age, about young 20s, I think, and it takes place over about 4 years, and he captures the hardships and the toll that Rockford, Illinois takes on its citizens, and how it's just kind of an inescapable place, and how it kind of molds you into these people that you don't want to be, because you set out to try and be your own person, try and do your own thing. But Rockford is just it's like a ticking time bomb, and it's an incredible film. You can check out my review right now on Roman's Movie Reviews on Facebook or Letterboxd. If you don't have a Facebook, just follow me at Roman RBC on Letterboxd there. But yeah, one of the year's best films. Absolutely incredible. I really hope that there's an outside shot that it can get nominated for like best documentary feature, because it is outstanding and more people should see it. And obviously a lot of people aren't going to connect in the way that I did, but it's still about so many things that people deal with every day, especially living in a city just outside of one of the biggest cities in the world. It's literally just outside Chicago, Illinois. A lot of people call Rockford like the sister city to Chicago, and the reality there is tough. And now I'm here in Arizona, away from that. But yeah, Minding the Gap, great. Saw that, and then I watched Platoon last night, which is incredible. One of the best films I've seen this year. It's outstanding, completely daring. The cinematography is some of the best I've seen, and it's a little abrasive, but it's kind of the point. And oh man, so good. But again, just me this week, of course. Just to kind of keep these episodes short, sweet, and condensed. We've got some news that I didn't talk about last week that I completely forgot about, and I should have, because it is an interesting topic, and it's a topic that really makes me sad. So Star Trek IV is probably going to be losing Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine due to some contract negotiations now that they're big-time stars. And, you know, obviously Chris Hemsworth is a major player in the MCU as Thor, and Chris Pine is now getting his due in the DC cinematic universe, being Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman. It is not good. It's not looking good for Paramount and their Star Trek IV film. First-time director S.J. Clarkson is going to be directing the project, and it was supposed to be the story about Pine or Kirk, rather, meeting his dad that we had thought died in the first one, and there's going to be some sort of time travel element, I'm assuming. But who knows what exactly the story was going to be, but that was basically the general premise. Now, if they lose both Pine and Hemsworth, they said they might continue, you know, with like big-time cast members like Zoe Saldana, who's a big star because of Guardians of the Galaxy now, Zachary Quinto as Spock, you know, just move forward with some of these players instead. But really, I don't know if they're going to end up doing that, because if you look at the box office for Star Trek to Star Trek Into Darkness to Star Trek Beyond, it gradually declined. And I think Into Darkness made just a little bit more than 09. But Star Trek 09 made some good money. Into Darkness made good money. And then they were coming out in a period when Star Wars was kind of dormant. Star Wars wasn't really doing anything. And obviously, whether you're a Trekkie or not, Star Wars is the biggest pop cultural IP in the history of pop culture IP. It started it. It's still it. You know, it's still got that it factor. But from 2005 until 2015, for about 10 years, Star Wars was pretty dormant. It wasn't really doing anything. You might have had some, you know, comics. You might have had a couple TV shows here and there, but none of it really like mattered, right? So Star Trek was kind of filling that gap. And J.J. Abrams came on for Star Trek 09, and he revived Star Trek, and because that had been gone for a little bit as well. And people really liked it. I think it's a great film. I wasn't a Star Trek fan. I'd never seen any Star Trek films before because I was a huge Star Wars fan, and that's all I watched. And then J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 09 really got me into the Star Trek fold. And then I saw Into Darkness, and I've always thought Into Darkness was just okay. I really don't think it's that impressive. For a lot of people, it's their favorite. I don't see how, but it is what it is. And then this is when Star Trek Into Darkness came out in 2013, and then this is when we had gotten word that Star Wars was coming back in 2015 with eventually what was to be titled The Force Awakens. And at this point, this is when it started shifting, where Star Trek was now like getting put on the back burner for audiences, and Star Wars was the big thing to focus on. So Star Trek Beyond came out in 2016, but in December of the previous year, Force Awakens came back. Obviously very beloved. It's a great film. I don't really see how anyone can say it's a bad film, but it basically killed Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek Beyond made like no money. It barely made its money back. And the reason why is because people were getting their fill with Star Trek for a couple years, and then Star Wars came back and basically murdered the franchise. Now, not murdered, I mean, it's going to come back, and like all things in Hollywood, they eventually come back, especially heroes and characters and whatnot. No one ever really stays dead. But Star Wars, you know, it's bigger, and that's unfortunate because I really think the Star Trek films offer up some great science fiction that Star Wars can't, because Star Wars is more fantasy than sci-fi, and it offers up this fantastical, otherworldly, other galaxy element, whereas Star Trek is rooted, it has fantastical elements with like aliens and races and all that, and other planets and breathing on, you know, all that type of stuff, but at the core, it's science fiction, because science fiction is progressive, and you know how we as a society can learn and get better through these journeys that we take. We meet other people, we meet other races on other planets, we figure out how to form these bonds. So Star Trek really offers up something great. And so now with Star Trek 4 possibly hanging in film purgatory, where we don't really know if it's going to die or not, it just kind of is caught in between. And I doubt they're going to go through with it, because they gotta, Hemsworth and Pine have to take a pay cut, because that's what Paramount wanted them to do, so they can have a bigger budget for the film, so that they can, you know, get the good effects, and they can get maybe a couple more cast members, hire someone like Meryl Streep for the villain or something, you know, to spend money there. But they don't want to do that, and that's unfortunate. But we'll see where it goes. But with Quentin Tarantino now saying that he's going to do his first franchise film with Star Trek and make it rated R, you know, that could be something that Paramount is only going to put a little bit of money into, because Quentin Tarantino has, I don't even know the highest budget a film of his has had, but you know, you can't imagine that it's going to be as much as like a Star Trek Into Darkness. And I'm excited for that project, because I think that he's going to offer up some great dialogue, and he's going to bring something cool to the Star Trek universe. But at the same time, with them announcing Picard, Patrick Stewart's Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek Discovery. Star Trek. Next Generation. There we go. So Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek Next Generation. You know, they're bringing his show back on TV, and with Star Trek Discovery doing relatively well with fans on the CBS streaming service, maybe Paramount is shifting their Star Trek IP to TV and streaming services, and not going to try and compete with Star Wars, because they're just going to lose money. They're going to get buried, which is unfortunate, because I think Star Trek, like I said, offers up a lot of great stuff that Star Wars doesn't have, and it's great to get a mix of both. And I've been meaning to check out Star Trek Discovery. I'm going to try and catch out Star Trek Next Generation and all that stuff. But, you know, it's pretty unfortunate, and I hope that they can figure something out. I doubt that they will, simply because it doesn't make any sense from a business perspective. But as a fan, please try and figure it out, because I think that you have a really special IP here, and I don't want to see that lost in the film landscape. So that's that for Star Trek 4 news. Speaking of Chris Pine, his newest film that's coming out in November, directed by David Mackenzie, director of Hell or High Water, Outlaw King. It is this large-scale epic that is being shown in select theaters around Oscar time, which is enticing, but it's also releasing on Netflix for most people, because they're probably not going to be living in LA, New York, or Florida, or Texas to be able to go see it, you know, because that's probably where it's going to premiere, is in any one of those 4 places. So you're going to see it at home on your nice TV, whether that's a 32-inch TV or a 50-inch 4K TV, whatever it might be. You're going to probably be seeing it at home. And David Mackenzie directed one of my favorite films of 2016, Hell or High Water, and a film that I believe had an outside chance of winning Best Picture. I think it's destined to become an American classic. It's extremely well made, great characters, great writing, it is a fantastic film. So I was always excited to see what David Mackenzie would do next. And obviously Netflix right now, they're producing a lot of content. I recently did an article and I was on a podcast talking about how Netflix is going to be releasing so much content that it's just going to overload. It's going to be quantity over quality, and that's mainly what it is. Netflix has a couple, gems in the rough or diamonds in the rough, but overall, they're not really delivering a consistent product for the amount of work that they're putting out, which is a terrible business model. It doesn't make any sense, but if it's appealing to somebody, then whoever's watching films on Netflix exclusively, then I guess it's for them, despite the fact that they're going to be losing so much of what people love to see in the coming months because everyone wants to start a streaming service now. So back to Outlaw King. It looks like this big scale epic, and to be honest, it didn't look good. I think that there's a lack of a budget, and I think you can see that. And I think you can see that it is a Netflix produced film. I don't know if they picked it up on a festival market. I should look into that to figure out, because usually when Netflix releases something or picks up something, it's from a festival and it's made its rounds there, and it generally gets a good response, right? So they pick it up and they have the rights to it and they produce it on their streaming service for all to see, which is great. I think it's awesome that Netflix has the ability to do that. But at the same time, if this film is just Netflix made, produced, and in their little studio or whatever, and then it's released to theaters, I still get a little worried, because although it's playing in select theaters, that's probably just in case there's an outside chance at Oscar stuff, which, maybe it gets the Best Popular Film Award. I don't know. But it's strange. It looks fine. Chris Pine looks great. He's a great actor. He's my favorite Hollywood blonde-haired, blue-eyed Chris. He is a talented dude. And to me, it was a little underwhelming. Like, it just didn't feel like... It just looked like a made-for-TV movie. And I guess in a way, I'm kind of devaluing art, or Netflix, I guess, and, their artistic creativity, but that's kind of what Netflix is. Like, it's made for TV. You can't go stream Netflix at a theater. You stream it at home on your phone, your laptop, your iPad, your TV, your PlayStation, whatever, right? And I think that there's a big difference, because whenever I see a bad film in theaters, I said at least I saw it in theaters. That at least elevates it in some capacity. I don't get mad that I wasted $8 because I saw the film and I get to critique it and talk about it and be a part of a discussion with thousands to millions of other people. But now when you're releasing this product on TV and it looks like it's made for TV and it's supposed to be this big, high budget, epic, grand film, it just doesn't look like that, and it doesn't show in anything really. The cinematography so far was kind of impressive, and I feel like there's a lot of cool things that they can do. Looks very similar to Braveheart, but overall I was just a little underwhelmed, and I'm really concerned for it, considering I love all of what is being put into it. You've got David Mackenzie and Chris Pine, and I love a big epic war film. And then Jeremy Saulnier, he recently, director of The Green Room, he released the trailer for Netflix's it's another type of cult film. He's directing another type of cult movie. I don't know the exact title of it, but it's got Jeffrey Wright from Westworld in there. And he's one of my favorite actors, but I'll have to check out that trailer because it just dropped as I was starting the podcast. And that's pretty much it. I'm a little concerned for Netflix. Always have been, always will. Not on the hype train. They have to prove me wrong first, and they have yet to do so. So until they create consistent films, then I'm not going to care about you. So now, moving on to a discussion piece that's not going to be ultimately the title of the video and the discussion topic at the end of the show. So there's a podcast out there called the Talon Brothers Podcast, starring my best friend Tyler and his buddies Nick and Nate Talon, who I've gotten to know recently over knowing Tyler. I've gotten to know them through Tyler, and we chat on Twitter, and we've chatted on the phone a couple times about Death Wish. And so recently in their podcast, which you can find on iTunes, a great show, by the way. It usually runs about an hour, 20 minutes to an hour, 40 minutes, but it is just 3 to 4 dudes that love film that are just talking about what they love and what they don't like. They talk about so many news topics and films that they watch throughout the week and offer up their perspective. And it's great to listen to simply because there's that built-in camaraderie and friendship, and it really allows the show to just fly by. Unfortunately, I love tuning in every week, so you should definitely check them out there. And Eventually, whenever I can start getting guests back on, I'd love to have Nick, Nate, and Tyler on. I originally wanted to start a podcast with Tyler, but considering the time differences and him being 1,800 miles away in Illinois, it was just very challenging. So I'm glad that they're doing that. I love listening every week. I'm always asking Tyler about updates on when it's going to be uploaded because I'm so excited. So go check that out there, because last week they had a discussion about the Florida Project, of which Tyler had watched for the first time. He gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Not that it matters, because ratings are arbitrary, but he didn't like the ending. He said that the final 10 to 15 seconds was generally awful, and it kind of really killed what the film was built on. And I think that I agree with him. I have to agree with him. And even though I gave it 5 out of 5, I think, and it was one of my favorite films of last year, and it would have been my favorite film of last year had the final 10 to 15 seconds not been there. And Nick and Nate were offering up a perspective that, obviously, and Tyler obviously knows that it's shot in a certain way with music a certain way to sort of evoke, the sense of childhood wonder and dream of doing something that she never got to do with her friend and get to experience this heightened reality beyond the outskirts of this land. And it's a moment that you could remove from the movie completely and you'd still get that sense of what Mooney wanted to accomplish. But at the same time, Sean Baker, a director who just knocks my socks off every time. Tangerine, a great film shot entirely on an iPhone, genius. Right? And then he's got Florida Project, which is one of my favorite films of last year, and just its plotless sort of Richard Linklater-esque demeanor about it, just this little girl and her friends not really understanding the harsh reality of their situation, but still being able to live life to the fullest at that age. It's a tremendous piece of filmmaking, and a film that I feel like deserves more recognition outside of Willem Dafoe, who is outstanding. Tyler made a point last week where he said he feels like Sean Baker just went and got someone that lives there and says, hey, you want to be in my movie? Because people are that damn good in it. And for the ending, it ends with Mooney, going up to her friend and crying because she's about to get taken away and she's never going to see her friend again. And she's going to have, her reality is finally hitting her like a brick wall. She's running right into it. And it's all kind of happening at once. And so it's overwhelming. And so the finale is of this high volume music and just these visuals of just them running to Disneyland and the camera zooming and swooning. And it doesn't quite fit with the way the film ends. So I've thought about this recently because Tyler and I had been talking about it. And I said, why didn't Sean Baker? Just because I feel like when you critique a film, if you say remove it completely, then you kind of defeat the director's vision. And I don't think anyone should just be like, oh, the film's great because it fits the director's vision. Because then every movie is good, technically. Every movie cannot be bad because it fits the director's vision, right? And their decision. Sean Baker, what he could have done to, amplify his meaning and purpose behind his film and the finale better is before Mooney gets to her friend's house, have the sequence where Mooney, she wants to go do something with her friend, something they never got to accomplish, and do it with less flamboyant music and less flair on camera work, but obviously shoot it in a way where it seems like we're convinced that she just ran to her friend's apartment and brought her to Disneyland and they just broke in or whatever and they're just living their life, and then all of a sudden you can cut back to her actually getting to her friend's door and shoot it like this. They're going up to the big Walt Disney castle, and as Mooney and her friend are getting to the Walt Disney castle in this imaginary head of, or in this imagination of Mooney's head, as she's getting to the Walt Disney door with her friend, she's actually knocking on the door of her friend's apartment, and she opens the door and she's crying and realizing that she's not going to be able to live that reality with her friend as she's getting there. And to me, that would have, been better. It just simply would have been better, and it would have not felt, because obviously Nick or Nate last week, I can never tell the difference between the two really. One of them made a point that it felt very like an epilogue, which I agree with. It did feel like an epilogue, but what you should have done is simply move it one scene before Mooney gets to her friend's house, and you can have this sequence where she's in Disneyland with her friend. She's imagining this reality or this world where she can go to this amazing place with her friend and experience it. But as she's getting to this Walt Disney castle with her friend, she's getting to her friend's place and crying, telling her that she's going to miss her and that she's scared and that she's sad. Maybe Sean Baker wanted to end with a happy ending, but it's still the reality that in which she lives. And that's the most important part. And I feel like that could have been done better. And it would arguably be one of the best films of the last couple of years. And it already kind of is. But at the same time, it would have been right up there with The Rival, La La Land, and Blade Runner 2049. And I feel like it would be a film that we would talk about more. And we'd talk about more about how incredible Sean Baker's entire scope and vision was, rather than engaging in this discourse about the epilogue or the finale of the film. So that's what I have to offer up for that. It's just kind of my perspective. Again, check it out on iTunes. It's an amazing podcast. I love listening every week. It's a great hour and 20 minutes. So with lots of great laughs as well. I can't wait to be on next year when I'm coming back in April, and hopefully they're still going. They all seem dedicated and they all love it. So keep going, guys. Great job. Next up, I am seeing a film on Thursday in IMAX called 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, this year is the 50th anniversary of the film. I actually watched it, I want to say 3 to 4 years ago, and I had watched it on my 32-inch Mac computer. I had rented it from like YouTube or Amazon or whatever, and it was the first film I ever watched back to back immediately, and it's still the only film I've ever done that with. I mean, I've seen films that, like, I saw like Civil War on a Thursday night and I saw it again on Friday, but there was like a lot of time in between there. But with 2001: A Space Odyssey, I finished it and then I instantly started it again because I wanted to comprehend everything better. I wanted to look at everything differently. And now, knowing the full scope of Stanley Kubrick's picture, I wanted to see everything immediately. I didn't want to miss anything and sleep on it and forget about something. And it's one of my favorite films ever. It's one of the best films ever made. Just the way that he shoots the film, the way that just these larger-than-life ships are just dancing across the stars with the music, and eventually what the film is about, and how technology is this dangerous thing for humanity, but at the same time can feel some form of sympathy. And it just, the way he does it is outstanding. I haven't seen it in full in a long time. I occasionally watch the first 25 minutes, the Dawn of Man sequence, whenever I need some inspiration, because it is so incredibly well done that it just inspires me to watch a movie or to write. And so sometimes I watch clips like that, and the Dawn of Man sequence does that for me. But I'm seeing it in IMAX. I never thought I would see it in theaters. And having seen 2 classic films in theaters in my life, Back to the Future and Saving Private Ryan, I saw Saving Private Ryan for the first time on the big screen, which was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then I watched Back to the Future, one of my favorite films ever, and having only seen it on the small screen, to see it on the big screen the way that it was originally intended was the best experience I've had with the film yet. And now that I'm seeing 2001 in the perfect form, like, to me, IMAX, or Dolby Digital rather, is the best way to see a film. And I'm going to be in there. I'm going to sit in row J, seat 20, right in the middle of the screen. And I'm going to see 2001: A Space Odyssey. No trailers. You just get right into it. It starts with the music, the overture, and then boom, you just get right into that Dawn of Man sequence. And from then on out, it's just going to be incredible. I seriously cannot wait. I love the movie so much that I'm probably going to cry as soon as it starts because of the music and just the cinematography, and because I love movies so much. And 2001: A Space Odyssey is a film that I'll always refer to as being a film that changed my life. And it's the reason why I love movies. So I can't wait to see it on IMAX on Thursday at 7 p.m. I'm just counting down the seconds, really, milliseconds. It's going to take forever to get there. We're still about 2 days away, but I'm excited. So last topic of the day, the discussion topic of the week. It's going to be a weekly thing now, where I'm going to be doing this, taking something that's relevant to the film climate, or film releases. Like, we've got Hereditary, which is releasing on digital, I think, this week. And so I watched The Exorcist yesterday because I hadn't seen it yet, and I want to get prepared for Hereditary. And yesterday I watched The Exorcist, and it was great. It's a great movie. I thought that I couldn't really connect with it on too many levels, but just the way that it's paced and the way that it's written is incredible. Plus, the cinematography smacks. It's utterly terrifying. There's no jump scares. It is just pure horror. And when you watch it in the context of 1973, there's a sequence where she has a crucifix and she's like stabbing her genitalia, right? seeing it in 1973, this movie was, I was talking to a couple people and they were telling me that this movie was basically like shunned from, general public and saying that's, it's disgusting, it's horrible, it's crude, it's awful. And so for that shock value for 1973, and for anyone that doesn't watch films in the context of which they release, you absolutely have to. Like it should be a requirement. It's obviously not something that you can just, turn a switch on or off, but you should be watching films in the context of which they released, and watching in the context of 1973 rather than by the standards of 2018. It was a really great experience. Again, I had a couple issues with connecting to it and the drama not exactly hitting it where I thought it would. The performances are great. But anyways, so when I made the post yesterday on my Facebook, I had asked people, because I had this conversation with people all the time. They tell me, oh, I saw that movie, it wasn't scary. And I'm like, what wasn't scary about it? And it's either there's too many jump scares or there's too little jump scares. And so I asked a lot of my friends on Facebook, I said, hey, film fans, what makes a movie scary to you? And I just need some reference points for this week. So I tagged a couple people, and we're just going to start with what Brendan said, and then I'm going to kind of give my general opinion on everything they said. But Brendan Krause says, what the external threat, zombies, paranormal, slasher, killer, etc., does to people psychologically and physically. I love that answer. I'll get back to that in a bit. Mike Calkins, huge fan of horror. One of the biggest fans of Suspiria. I had him on a couple weeks ago. We both can't wait for that. But he said, good characters, a strong sense of place and atmosphere, and tight cinematography. Character is so important because we need to care about these people in order for there to be any tension when things go awry. I think that is what a lot of horror films misunderstand. I also completely agree with that. Zachary Soslin says building tension. Noah Rudko says psychological horror. It is also important to have some connection to the characters, otherwise you aren't worried about what happens to them. Playtest, an episode of Black Mirror, is a great example of psychological horror. Tristan Mayer says, for me, the entire genre is reliant on creating dread and uncertainty. Even jump scares only work when there's a build-up. I think of a movie like The Witch, where when you look at the plot beat to beat, not much really happens, but everything in the movie adds together to create a constant sense of pending danger. To me, that sense of uncertainty and anxiety is horror. Crazy visuals of bloody bodies and demons can be cool, but they don't create a real sense of horror without being placed in a world that's already scary to begin with. Tristan basically sums up my thoughts. Rakesh says, sorry if I botched your name, making the mundane seem scary. Also, movies that follow a certain dream logic where things just seem off-kilter but not explicitly frightening always scare me. So I'm assuming movies like It Follows, The Witch especially, and I'm assuming a movie like Hereditary probably fits that bill. The Thing is one for me that would fit that bill. The Thing is an outstanding motion picture. And then Devon, who I had early on one of the first episodes, one of the biggest horror fans I know, he goes, what makes a horror film scary is the experience. I'm a smidge desensitized to horror as far as it's scaring me. Not that I don't get scared, but it takes quite a bit these days. So how much can a horror film put me in the situation and keep me on the edge of my seat is what it boils down to. I want to feel uncomfortable, tense, disgusted, or shocked. Depends what kind of horror I'm looking for, which I sort into two categories. Do I want to watch something fun or something to challenge me? The movies that scare me the most are realistic stories with slight horror/supernatural elements, if any. Humanity-based horror tends to be the scariest, I suppose, but again, I can't really think of the last movie to truly scare me past the theater. So all great answers. All of them I generally agree with in some regard. And I think for me, let me preface everything else I'm about to say is think about while I'm talking, what is it that makes you scared when you're watching a horror movie? Are you someone that goes in and is like, okay, this movie has to check off jump scare boxes? Does this movie have to check off atmosphere, character? For me, a movie like It Comes at Night with no jump scares is a movie that I would define as pitch perfect horror. Is it a perfect movie? I wouldn't say it's a perfect movie, but pitch perfect horror filmmaking. In the regard that it's a film that has good characters in it, that go through many obstacles, that are living in a reality unlike ours that is supernatural almost, right? And it's a movie that's ultimately about something that we deal with in our reality, because movies reflect our reality, right? And they mirror the things that we deal with and the things that are applicable and tangible to our lives, right? Even though if paranoia isn't something that you can touch, it's something that you can feel, almost to the point where you can grasp it in your hands or feel it on your face or evoke that emotion in your face while looking at someone or at yourself in a mirror, right? So a movie like It Comes at Night, it fits the bill of what everyone was talking about. It's got great characters, but it's a movie that's ultimately about kind of masculinity, and it's also a movie about being paranoid and how paranoia can cause you to do things you never intended to do and to make bad decisions, to make rash decisions, to do something that you didn't want to, because that is a terrifying element. And with a lot of horror films, I haven't seen Slender Man, but if you want to go back and listen to the Talon Brothers podcast last week, they have an incredible 15-minute sequence where they just slam Slenderman, and it is hilarious. Tyler does a great impression of one of the film sequences, and I laugh every time I think about it. But movies like Slenderman, they're trying to scare you. They're trying to physically scare you, right? They're not trying to make you feel scared. They want you to scare by jumping because of loud noises, bird hitting a window, cat screeching or running across the room and jumping in front of the camera. Stupid stuff like that. It's why I stay away from general mainstream horror, especially in the theater, because people that usually go see horror films are usually the loudest, most rambunctious, most annoying groups of people I've ever met. But the point is, movies like The Witch, no jump scares, but it's a movie that creates this off-kilter sense of reality. And it's a movie about, familial bonds breaking under pressure due to this crazy scenario that's, come up in their lives. They're all trying to live a life, but how can they do that when all of these things are happening around them? And it ends up being about us. A movie like The Exorcist is a perfect example. It's a movie about this mom having to deal with the fact that all of a sudden her daughter is possessed. Her daughter that she loves so much. She's a great drawer. She's got so much talent. And now she might be on the verge of death because she made a mistake. And great horror does that. A movie like The Thing, it's a movie that takes place in places that we probably shouldn't be visiting, places that we're not familiar with seeing in our own reality. But what it does is it takes our reality outside of where we are in, I'm living in Arizona, I'm not living in Antarctica, right? And so what it does is it takes these places and these settings, and it creates this sense of dread, horror, something lurking around the corner, and doing something supernatural with it while commentating on something in our own reality. And to me, that is not only perfect filmmaking, but it's something that I talked about with Tyler recently. And I told him, I said, when horror is at its best, to me, that is the best filmmaking achievable. Because not only does it give you a great experience, because a lot of people go to the theater to get a great experience. Example, Christopher Nolan films. Those are experiences. But those experiences are also about something. There's something purposeful and meaningful behind what is happening on screen. It's something that we can see in that screen and apply it to our reality. Now, a movie like The Witch, I saw it sitting on my couch while rain was pelting my windows and the wind was howling. I watched that movie through my fingers because I was so scared because of not only what it meant to me as an individual, but to the atmosphere that was created. And to me, that's great horror. It's why I love movies like The Thing. Whenever I say I don't watch horror movies, it's because I don't like being scared. I don't like going in my room by myself late at night and trying to make sure that there isn't some monster lying under my bed. I don't want to go into a dark room because this film just created this traumatization of dark rooms and dark corners and dark high ceilings and stuff like that. We don't know what lies in the dark. So to me, horror is a very special genre, and it's a genre, I feel like it's a lot of crap. I do crap on mainstream horror films all the time, as do many other people, rightfully so. But at the same time, if you go into a horror film and you walk out saying, that was dumb, but at some point you felt this tension and anxiety build up in you and you felt like you were going to be physically sick to your stomach, that's good horror, and you got scared. And if you go out of the theater and you exit the theater and you feel a little anxious getting to your car, you're thinking about some gruesome imagery that you saw or terrifying imagery that you're afraid you might see the next time you go around a corner, you got scared, and that's great horror. I'm not telling you that how everyone should watch a film and react, but generally, on that premise, that's great horror. So thanks everyone for your answers. I'm going to be tagging you in the post when I post this episode of the podcast sometime over the next 24 hours. Thank you guys for listening. Today we went over Star Trek 4 news. We went over 2001 A Space Odyssey, Minding the Gap, the fact that you should check out the Talon Brothers podcast on iTunes. It's an incredible podcast every week. And horror. Be scared. Have fun. Watch some horror movies. I might be seeing Hereditary personally. I'm still a little nervous. I think I might hold off on it a bit longer. But that'll do it this week for this episode of the Showtime with Roman podcast. Tonight, First Reformed releases on Blu-ray, so I'll be picking that up and watching it when I get home. And and then I'll just have my sights set on Thursday. I can't wait. Still working on my First Reformed article every day. I'm just about finished up with the first act. I've got about a paragraph and a half left. And then that act will be up, and I'll make sure to post that link in the description below on whichever episode I'm doing when that releases. So thank you again for listening. This has been the Showtime with Roman podcast. Keep on watching movies and check me out on Letterboxd. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Comment. Let's have a discussion about this week's discussion topic. And be sure to ask other peers of yours about the discussion topic as well. If you want, you can show them this episode of the podcast and we can all have a discussion about it. So thank you once again. Have a wonderful rest of your week and keep on watching movies.